Okay, we're back. We're going to continue reading chapter 3 of Brave New World. We are on page 43, and let's share that. So you will see here that where we stopped, and the next part we're going to read is in the girls' locker room, and we're going to be reading what's going on with Lenina and her friend Fanny. And after all, Fanny's tone was coaxing, it's not as though there were anything painful or disagreeable about having one or two men besides Henry, and seeing that you ought to be a little bit more promiscuous. Now we're back to the tour. Stability, insisted the controller. Stability, the primal and the ultimate need. Stability, hence all this. With a wave of his hand, he indicated the gardens, the huge building of the conditioning center, the naked children furtive in the undergrowth or running across the lawns. Now we're back to the woman's locker room. Lenina shook her head. Somehow, she mused, I hadn't been feeling very keen on promiscuity lately. There are times when one doesn't. Haven't you found that too, Fanny? Fanny nodded her sympathy and understanding. But one's got to make the effort, she said sententiously. One's got to play the game. After all, everyone belongs to everyone else. Yes, everyone belongs to everyone else, Lenina repeated slowly, and sighing, was silent for a moment. Then, taking Fanny's hand, gave it a little squeeze. You're quite right, Fanny. As usual, I'll make the effort. Now we're back at the tour. Impulse arrested spills over, and the flood is feeling, the flood is passion, the flood is even madness. It depends on the force of the current, the height and strength of the barrier. The unchecked stream flows smoothly down its appointed channels into a calm well-being. The embryo is hungry. Day in, day out, the blood surrogate pump unceasingly turns its 800 revolutions a minute. The decanted infant howls, and once a nurse appears with a bottle of external secretion. Feeling lurks in that interval of time between desire and consumption. Shorten that interval, break down all those old unnecessary barriers. Fortunate boys, said the controller. No pains have been spared to make your lives emotionally easy, to preserve you, so far as that is possible, from having emotions at all. Ford's in his liver, murmured the DHC. All is well with the world. Now we are in the men's locker room. Lenina Crown? Said Henry Foster, echoing the assistant predestinator's question as he zipped up his trousers. Oh, she's a splendid girl, wonderfully pneumatic. I'm surprised you haven't had her. I can't think how it is I haven't, said the assistant predestinator. I certainly will, at the first opportunity. From his place on the opposite side of the changing room aisle, Bernard Marx overheard what they were saying and turned pale. Now we're in the women's locker room. And to tell the truth, said Lenina, I'm beginning to get just a tiny bit bored with nothing but Henry every day. She pulled on her left stocking. Do you know Bernard Marx? She asked in a tone whose excessive casualness was evidently forced. Fanny looked startled. You don't mean to say... Why not? Bernard's an Alpha Plus. Besides, he asked me to go to one of the Savage reservations with him. I've always wanted to see a Savage reservation. But his reputation... What do I care about his reputation? They say he doesn't like obstacle golf. They say, mocked Lenina. And then he spends most of his time by himself, alone. There was horror in Fanny's voice. Well, he won't be alone when he's with me. And anyhow, why are people so beastly to him? I think he's rather sweet. She smiled to herself. How absurdly shy he had been, frightened almost, as though she were a world controller, and he a gamma minus machine minder. Back to the tour. Consider your own lives, said Mustafa Mon. Has any of you ever encountered an insurmountable obstacle? The question was answered by a negative silence. Has any of you been compelled to live through a long time interval between the consciousness of a desire and its fulfillment? Well, began one of the boys and hesitated. Speak up, said the DHC. Don't keep his lordship waiting. I once had to wait nearly 4 weeks before a girl would let me have her. And you felt a strong emotion in consequence. Horrible. Horrible, precisely, said the controller. Our ancestors were so stupid and short-sighted that when the first reformers came along and offered to deliver them from those horrible emotions, they wouldn't have anything to do with them. So, emotions, that's what all of this is about, is suppressing emotions, insurmountable obstacles, and just making everything easy. Easy and neutral. Now we're in the boys' locker room again. Talking about her as though she were a bit of meat, Bernard ground his teeth. Have her here, have her there, like mutton. Degrading her to so much mutton. Mutton's like a piece of meat. She said she'd think it over. She said she'd give me an answer this week. Oh, Ford. He would have liked to go up to them and hit them in the face hard again and again. Yes, I really do advise you try her, Henry Foster was saying. So remember, Bernard is totally not like the other guys. The other guys are acting just the way you should act in that society, and that is to just pass around people like it's no big deal because everyone belongs to everyone else. But for Bernard, he has a crush on Lenina, and he has feelings for her, and he hates the fact that they're talking about her like a piece of meat. Okay, so now we're back to the tour, Mustafa Mon and the controller. Take echnogenesis. Feisner and Kawuchi had got the whole Take echnogenesis. Fitzner and Kawuchi had got the whole technique worked out, but would the governments look at it? No, there was something called Christianity. Women were forced to go on being viviparous. Remember having children naturally? And now we're in the women's locker room. He's so ugly, said Fanny, but I rather like his looks. And been so small. Fanny made a grimace. Smallness was so horribly and typically low caste. I think that's rather sweet, said Lenina. One feels one would like to pet him, you know, like a cat. Fanny was shocked. They say somebody made a mistake when he was still in the bottle. Thought he was a gamma and put alcohol in his blood surrogate. That's why he's so stunted. What nonsense! Lenina was indignant. Sleep teaching was actually prohibited in England. There was something called liberalism. Parliament, if you know what that was, passed a law against it. The records survive. Speeches about liberty of the subject. Liberty to be insufficient and miserable. Liberty to be a round peg in a square hole. But, my dear chap, you're welcome, I assure you. You're welcome. Henry Foster patted the assistant predestinator. Oh, sorry. Now we're in the boys' locker room. But, my dear chap, you're welcome, I assure you. You're welcome. Henry Foster patted the assistant predestinator on the shoulder. Everyone belongs to everyone else, after all. So he's telling this man, yeah, you're welcome to have Lenina. Go right ahead. No big deal. Everyone belongs to everyone else. 100 repetitions 3 nights a week for 4 years, thought Bernard Marx. who is a specialist on hypnopedia. 62,400 repetitions make one truth. Idiots. Or the caste system, constantly proposed, constantly rejected. There was something called democracy, as though men were more than psychochemically equal. Well, all I can say is that I'm going to accept his invitation. Bernard hated them, but they were two. They were large. They were strong. Then the 9 Years' War began in AF 141. Not even if it were true about the alcohol in his blood surrogate. Visogene, chlorceptrin, ethyl isoacetate, dienglotaracine, trichloromethyl, chloroformate, dichlorethyl sulfide, not to mention hyaluronic acid. Which I simply don't believe, Lenina continued. The noise of 14,000 aeroplanes advancing in open order, but in the curve Vestidam and the 8th arrondissement, the explosion of the anthrax bombs is hardly louder than the popping of a paper bag. Because I do want to see a Savage reservation. CHA C6H2NO2 8 NgCnO2 equals, well, what? An enormous hole in the ground. An enormous hole in the ground, a pile of masonry, some bits of flesh and mucus, a foot with a boot still on it, flying through the air and landing, flop, in the middle of the geraniums, the scarlet ones. Such a splendid show that summer. So he's talking about the anthrax bombs and the war that, caused a lot of this world state to happen. You're hopeless, Lenina. I give you up. The Russian technique for infecting water supplies was particularly ingenious. Back turned to back, Fanny and Lenina continued their changing in silence. The 9 Years' War, the great economic collapse, there was a choice between world control and destruction, between stability and... Okay, this is important. Again, if you're going to underline very lightly. Very, very lightly, and only in pencil. Never, ever highlighter. Never pen. Okay. Again, we're at the girls. Oh, no, now we're at the boys' locker room. Fanny Crown's a nice girl, too, said the assistant predestinator. In the nurseries, the elementary class consciousness lesson was over. The voices were adapting future demand to future industrial supply. I do love flying, they whispered. I do love flying. I do love having new clothes. I do love... Liberalism, of course, was dead of anthrax, but all the same you couldn't do things by force. Not nearly so pneumatic as Lenina. Oh, not nearly. But old clothes are beastly, continued the untiring whisper. Now we have a whole nother scene. Now we're back in like the room where the kids are repeated the same phrases over and over, so it kind of gets into their head. So this is a whole nother scene that we're hearing here. But old clothes are beastly, continued the untiring whisper. We always throw away old clothes. Ending is better than mending. Ending is better than mending. Ending is better. Can you tell that these new phrases that they're being told are to get them to consume things, to buy things? Because in this society, they need to purchase things in order for things to run and factories to be useful and needed. Government's an affair of sitting, not hitting. You rule with the brains and the buttocks, never with the fists. For example, there was the conscription of consumption. There, I'm ready, said Lenina, but Fanny remained speechless and averted. Let's make peace, Fanny darling. Every man, woman, and child compelled to consume so much a year in the interests of industry, the sole result. Ending is better than mending. The more stitches, the less riches, the more stitches. One of these days, said Fanny with dismal emphasis, you'll get into trouble. Conscientious objection on an enormous scale. Anything not to consume, back to nature. I do love flying. I do love flying. Back to culture. Yes, actually to culture. You can't consume much of it if you sit still and read books. Do I look all right? Lenina asked. Her jacket was made of green bottle acetate cloth with green viscous fur at the cuffs and collar. 800 simple lifers were mowed down by machine guns at Golders Green. Ending is better than mending. Ending is better than mending. Corduroy shorts and white viscose woolen stockings turned down below the knee. Then came the famous British Museum massacre. 2,000 culture fans gassed with dichlorethyl sulfide. A green and white jockey cap shaded Lenina's eyes. Her shoes were bright green and highly polished. In the end, said Mustafa Mond, the controllers realized that force was no good. The slower but indefinitely sure methods of ectogenesis, neo-Pavilion conditioning, and hypnopedia. And round her waist she wore a silver-mounted green Morocco surrogate cartridge belt, bulging, for Lenina was not a Freemartin, with the regulation supply of contraceptives. So she carried around her contraceptive on her belt because she wasn't a Freemartin. Remember, a Freemartin is a girl who is sterile and can't have babies. Lenina has to prevent herself from having babies because she's not sterile. A Freemartin is a female who's sterile. I don't know why they don't just sterilize the boys. Anyways, the discoveries of Pfitzner and Kawaguchi were at last made use of in intensive propaganda against viviparous reproduction. Perfect, cried Fanny enthusiastically. She could never resist Lenina's charm for long. And what a perfectly sweet Malthusian belt, accompanied by a campaign against the pest, by the closing of museums, the blowing up of historical monuments. Luckily, most of them had already been destroyed during the 9 Years' War, but the suppression of all books published before AF 150. I simply must get one like it, said Fanny. There were some things called the pyramids, for example. My old black patent bandolier, and a man called Shakespeare. You've never heard of them, of course. It's an absolute disgrace, that bandolier of mine. Such are the advantages of a really scientific education. The more stitches, the less riches. The more stitches, the less. That's the whisper in the decanting room, or the conditioning room. The introduction of R. Ford's first Model T. I've had it nearly 3 months. Chosen as the opening date of the new era. Ending is better than mending. Ending is better. There was a thing, as I've said before, called Christianity. Ending is better than mending. The ethics and philosophy of underconsumption. I love new clothes. I love new clothes. I love. So essential when there was underproduction, but in an age of machines and the fixation of nitrogen, positively a crime against society. Henry Foster gave it to me. All crosses had their tops cut and became T's. There was also a thing called God. It's a real Morocco surrogate. We have the world state now, and Ford's Day celebrations, and community sings, and solidarity services. Ford, how I hate them. This is the boys' locker room, Bernard Marx was thinking. There was a thing called heaven, but all the same they used to drink enormous quantities of alcohol. Like meat, like so much meat. There was a thing called the soul and a thing called immortality. Do ask Henry where he got it. But they used to take morphia and cocaine. And what makes it worse? Oh, sorry. And what makes it worse, she thinks herself as meat. This is Bernard talking. 2,000 pharmacologists and biochemists were subsidized in AF 178. He does look glum. He does look glum, said the assistant predestinator, pointing at Bernard Marx. 6 years later, it was being produced commercially. The perfect drug. Let's bait him. Euphoric, narcotic, pleasantly hallucinant. Glum, Marx, glum. The clap on the shoulder made him look up. It was that brute, Henry Foster. What you need is a gramosoma. All the advantages of Christianity and alcohol, none of their defects. Ford, I should like to kill him. But all he did was to say, no thank you, and fend off the pro-offered tube of tablets. Take a holiday from reality whenever you like, and come back without so much as a headache or a mythology. Take it, insisted Henry Foster. Take it. Stability was practically assured. 1 cubic centimeter cures 10 gloomy sentiments, said the assistant predestinator, citing a piece of homely hypnopedic wisdom. It only remained to conquer old age. Damn you, shouted Bernard Marx. Hoity-toity, hoity-toity. Gondol hormones, transfusion of young blood, magnesium salts. And do you remember that a gram is better than a dram? Than a dam? They went out laughing. All the psychological stigmata of old age have been abolished, and along with them, of course. Don't forget to ask him about the Malthusian belt, said Fanny. Along with them, all the old man's mental peculiarities, characters remain constant throughout a whole lifetime. 2 rounds of obstacle golf to get through before dark. I must fly. Work, play at 60, our powers and taste are what they were at 17. Old men in the bad old days used to renounce, retire, take to religion, spend their time reading, thinking. Idiots, swine, Bernard Marx was saying to himself as he walked down the corridor to the lift. Now such is progress. The old men work, the old men copulate, the old men have no time, no leisure from pleasure, not a moment to sit down and think, or if ever by some unlucky chance such a crevice of time should yawn in the solid substance of their distractions, there is always soma, delicious soma, 1/2 gram for a half a holiday, 1 gram for a weekend, 2 grams for a trip to the gorgeous east, 3 for a dark eternity to the moon, returning whence they find themselves on the other side of the crevice, safe from the solid ground of daily labor and distraction, scampering from feelie to feelie, from girl to pneumatic girl, from electromagnetic golf course too. Go away, little girl, shouted the DHC angrily. Go away, little boy. Can't you see that his Fordship's busy? Go do your erotic play somewhere else. Suffer, little children, said the controller. Slowly, majestically, with a faint humming of machinery, the conveyors moved forward, 33 centimeters an hour. In the red darkness glinted innumerable rubies. So now it's going back to where it started, which was in the place where the babies were in the little incubators. Okay, so why is Bernard Marx considered to be strange? I kind of already told you that answer. It's because he acts so differently. He's shorter than the rest. So if you go back to this card, you can rewind back. You can get the answer to number 17 on your homework or your assignment. He has a bad reputation for being different. So there's so much in this chapter, but what we learned about at the very end of this chapter is what soma is. And soma is basically a drug that they take to keep their emotions even and level. So if you're feeling a little weird or you're feeling a little out of sorts, then you take soma. And they also said in this chapter that they learned how to take away old age. So people look the same age for their entire lifetime, and then they remain, productive and able to work and useful to society by never aging. So it goes through this section and tells you kind of the things that they took away gradually when they were becoming the world state. And notice how he also mentions the past as the bad old days. Instead of saying the good old days, he calls it the bad old days. So it's kind of interesting. All right, so that is all of chapter 3. You will find chapter 4 and chapter 5 a whole lot easier to understand because it just follows the one characters. So we're going to follow in chapter 4, Lenina telling Bernard Marx that she is going to accept his invitation to go to the Savage Reservation. We're also going to go with Lenina on her date to the golf courses. They take helicopters to go to the golf courses, and she's going to go with Henry Foster. And there's 2 parts, so we get to see it from Lenina's side, and the second part is from Bernard's side. So we get a little bit better of a taste of what's going on in Bernard's head. And then chapter 5 is a chapter you have to read also. And I don't remember what this one's about, but you're gonna have to read chapter 5 too. All right, see you in class next week. Hope you listen to this and watch this. Hope it helped. Bye.